And this is a place I'm going to be asking you some questions, and you can respond to those in chat in Zoom, or if you'd like to put anything in the note-taking area, that's fine too. That way I'll be able to refer to these later. And so there'll be several questions we'll go through, but at the end, I'll be presenting on the Global Competence Certificate. And for that, you may want to, this will be your questions and my responses. I won't do them all online right now, but if you want to put your name so I know to make sure I reach you, you can do that. And at the very end, I just left a place for if you have feedback that you'd like to give me. There is an evaluation form for people with clock hours, but this would be just information for me to help plan what I need to do next. So I'm going to work on presenting my presentation now. Let's see if I can. Okay, anyway, here I am. I think you've seen this screen before. I will just start right in. The topic today that I decided to address was meeting the needs of heritage language learners remotely, because obviously everybody's thinking about what to do in this time that we need to prepare for remote learning. So I'm going to start with several questions that we're going to explore based on, and I'll be sharing information based on the Heritage Language Symposia that we've been organizing at the University of Washington for about 6 years. And we brought in just fabulous, wonderful speakers over the years, and we've had our own team presenting. So over the years, we've learned quite a bit about what is effective with heritage language learners. And of course, our program that we do at the University of Washington with Russian and with Portuguese is for heritage language learners. So we've had entire summers to work on perfecting that. Of course, those were primarily in-person programs, but it's a slightly different challenge here. And so I'll take kind of the learnings from our experiences with those heritage language symposia and think about how do we do these things remotely. And I have an answer to that, which is a project that's sort of my other hat, not my languages hat specifically, but more international education. So we'll just dive right in. By the way, I've included the links here to these various symposia. We do post the handouts and the presentational materials there going back to 2014. So there's a lot of excellent materials that you can get from the StarTalk website there. I'll put this link in that Google Doc. I didn't have it yet, but I will, so you can reference it. So when I refer to like the 2019 Heritage Language Symposium, it's from this one. It's a presentation or something for that. So the first question I'd like to pose is, who is a heritage language learner? And I'll just give you a hint that there's no one right answer. So either in the chat or in that Google Doc, just write down some answers about what you think that is. What do we mean by that when we call somebody a heritage language learner? What does that mean? I'm going to see if I can glance at the chat. Zoe, if you have a chance to look at the other one, that'd be great. Language spoken at home. Speakers are exposed to the language and their culture at home. Parents speak that language. They might have done it before schooling. They inherited their language from their parents, were born and raised outside an area where it is spoken. Right, yeah, all of those are good examples. And keep adding, because like I say, it turns out there's actually many definitions, and I'm going to go to the next slide. And this was from our first symposium, actually, and I was sharing this from the work of Masha Polinsky and Olga Kagan from 2007. So typically in the research field of heritage language learning, there's two definitions. A narrow definition, which is around functional fluency. In other words, what can the students or the people do in the language? And so they've been exposed to a particular language in childhood, which is why it's correct when you said either in childhood or with their family or at home and so on. But typically they did not learn it to the full capacity that a native speaker of the language would learn it, because another language has become dominant. So often if you're living in another language setting, like obviously we are here in the United States with English, English just starts to take over. And you could also say that there's reduced input to the child to acquire the language, because they're probably just getting input from parents, for example, family members, relatives, people from the community. But if the minute they step outside their home, and certainly when they go to school typically, then they're not able to continue with the language. The broader definition, however, which is the one that I really personally like to adhere to, is that those who have been raised with a strong cultural connection to a particular language, usually through family interaction. And so that has to do with cultural affinity. Often people in this setting may not even really speak that language. And since I'm married to a Japanese American, I know that situation very well. A lot of Japanese American children born in, especially in the 50s, they may have been sent to Japanese language school. Their parents may have been fluent even in the language, but there was such a cultural stigma to learning the language of, you know, I mean, we had just barely out of World War II. So a lot of the people in that generation, and then of course subsequent generations, didn't really learn the language, but there was still strong cultural affinity. Okay, our next, one second here, I seem to be getting the waiting room, so I kind of distracts me here 1 second. Okay, what can we do to attend to the needs of heritage language learners? And again, if you could go to that Google Doc, if that's convenient for you, or the chat, just start drafting a few ideas. Not seeing too much in chat yet. Any ideas about this? What can we do to attend to the needs of heritage language learners? Remember, their needs may be different depending on whether they actually learned the language at home. Maybe they were, you know, born into a family. Maybe they immigrated even when they were 3 or 4 or something like that. So they were, at that point, they were native speakers at the 3 or 4 year old level. Or they may have come, they may have been born here from birth, experiencing that language at home plus English. Okay, somebody's got their sound down, so I think you might have to turn that off. Okay, so here are some that were, let's see, I think I may skip one. Yes, this was from our 2015 symposium. It was about attending to the needs of heritage language learners in mixed classrooms, which is certainly one of the settings where language teachers often run into those students. This was Dr. Maria Carrera, who's come a number of times to work with us. Some of you are familiar with her. And so I just, again, I've pulled out just a few things that I want us to be thinking about, because it gives a context for the things that I'm going to talk about next. Oops. Sorry, I'm sorry that I'm having a little trouble. Okay. First of all, you have to know your learners. Well, you always need to do that, honestly, but with heritage language learners, you really need to know them, because some may have strong cultural affinity, but not be that fluent in the language. Others may be virtually like native speakers, especially if they've had opportunities to interact, like say to go back to their home, the country of their parents, their family, and so on. You have to strive for a rich classroom discourse. In other words, they've got to really be hearing real language. It doesn't work for them to give them vocabulary lists and things like that. All of the materials need to be meaningful, engaging, and accessible. You need to make the students partners in their own language. And this is particularly true if, like in my case, for example, if I'm working with our Russian heritage speakers, I'm not myself a native speaker. I'm a second language learner of Russian. So my Russian is probably nowhere near as good as theirs in speaking and conversation, but I might actually have better reading and writing skills than they do, because I learned it in a formal academic setting. You need to differentiate and consider the demographics of the group that you're working with. Okay, so the next one is about project-based learning. How can project-based learning meet the needs of heritage language learners? And again, if you want to add something to chat or into the Google Doc, take a couple minutes to do that. I'm just going to stop talking for a minute. Yeah, I like these points from before, like don't mock the heritage language speakers' grammar or tell them that they do it wrong. That absolutely gets you nowhere. It gets them nowhere. That's the saddest part. It can discourage them, honestly. Any ideas about the project-based learning? And I didn't put in a question here, and I'm not really going to do a poll at the moment, but I should have asked, are you familiar with what project-based learning is? But that's okay. I'm going to introduce some concepts from there in just a moment. I see a couple here now. It can help them to learn more about different cultures and how you can guide them to authentic and perhaps more challenging resources. Yes, those are two great words, authentic and challenging. Don't ever underestimate. It's better to just, to really keep them challenged but support them. You may need to provide scaffolding. Students research and study about an interesting theme as a project. PBL naturally differentiates for learners while also allowing for the pursuit of new authentic knowledge. Yes, these are all great points. Helps them become self-motivated, develop agency. Absolutely, that is very true. So yeah, again, I'm going to pull some of these from Maria Carrera's presentation. Let's see, or did we go the wrong way? Let me see. Okay, back this way. Outcome project-based learning. Okay, this was her 2018 presentation in Seattle. This one actually, we weren't at the University of Washington because there was a bomb threat, I think, and we went to Hamilton International Middle School. These were some of the topics in that presentation, so I think you'd find that really interesting to go back and visit that, the whole content if you'd like to. But here's the key concepts from PBL or project-based learning. Learner-centered, it takes time, so it's over a period of time. There's complex issues, solving problems and things like that. It's got a relation to real life challenges, and there's a product about which they will communicate. So if you have all of those elements, you're in the right track to do PBL. Okay, here's another question. How can we challenge heritage language learners to step outside their comfort zone? So again, if you put some ideas in the chat or in that Google Doc, that would be great. Giving you a little think time this time. Interdisciplinary study, like STEM-related language. Yes, that's been really successful for us in our Star Talk program. Yes, working in small mixed language ability groups. We've done that really well. In fact, our Portuguese Star Talk program was half Portuguese heritage language learners who were, very fluent in Portuguese, but a number of them didn't really know how to read and write it. And the other half of the students were Spanish speaking students, many of them heritage learners, some dual language, or even students that had gotten to the AP level in high school, but they were very literate in Spanish. So they used their Spanish literacy with the guidance of Eduardo Viana da Silva, our instructor, to get to Portuguese. And then, so it was very mixed groups, and it worked really beautifully. Make them feel comfortable, small groups and things like that. Yeah, definitely. Okay. Gotta go the right way. So I'm going to share a few of the things that we shared. This was actually in an article that was published in the Language Educator with our Star Talk team. As I mentioned, Eduardo Viana da Silva, Svetlana Abramova from Russian, myself, and Dr. Bridget Yaden, who's been our lead instructor for our teacher program since really the beginning. And she's actually president of WAFLT now. Not WAFLT, ACTFL. She's been president of WAFLT a number of times, but anyway, so here's a few highlights from that. These were some of the strategies that we used for incorporating project-based learning in the heritage language classes. So some of the lessons learned were like, you have to provide enough time for students to bond. So if they're going to be working on a project together, they also have to kind of get to know each other and have trust and understand each other and so on. In our Portuguese program, we introduced the Global Competence Matrix, which you'll see is something that I'll be talking about shortly. And that was a way to really bring them into thinking about researching, investigating global issues, recognizing perspectives, communicating in all various forms, and in particular, taking action, taking it that further step, which is another great way to get the students to use the language that is strong for them, but to develop the communication skills that are less strong for them. We needed to promote a collaborative and positive atmosphere. So we didn't do things that were competitive. And we've been very fortunate in our Star Talk program, even though it was a university credit program for high school students, we didn't, it was non-graded, and students didn't need grades or points and things like that to motivate them. It was the work itself and the growth in their proficiency that was really inspiring. You want to take advantage of the individual strengths in each group. So again, as I mentioned where we had mixed group of Portuguese and Spanish, we would mix them up in a way so that the Spanish students could do the things that they were capable of doing, even though they were really just beginning language Portuguese speakers. But the Portuguese students could build on their strengths, but also work on developing the areas that weren't as strong, and that's supporting that self-directed learning. So those were all things that we learned from that. Okay, I think this is my last question, but how can we use the heritage language as the medium of instruction and not the target? And I might say not just how can we, but why is that important? So take a moment to put something in the chat or the Google Doc that I shared, if you don't mind. How can we make sure, why is it important to use the heritage language as the medium of instruction, not just the target? Yeah, starting day one, use the heritage language, yeah. Now that's why you may need to know who your students are before kind of day one of the course, because if you have students that are, say, have the heritage language affinity, cultural affinity, but actually can't speak the language, you could put them in an awkward place. But if you know in advance, you can set them up for success by making sure that you scaffold for the ones who are not so fluent, what they'll need in order to be successful, while you challenge the ones who are already very comfortable with the language. Yeah, they need to learn about culture, the products, practices, perspectives. Absolutely. You know, it's always true that you can't just assume that because a person can speak a language, whether you're a second language learner of that language or a heritage speaker, even for that matter, that you necessarily know all those aspects of the products, practices, and perspectives that we always talk about as part of the national standards. Provide authentic, culturally responsive learning materials. Yes, yes, indeed. So this was a few points from our 2019 keynote. This was Eve Zizek was speaking, and she's more of a researcher, but she talked about the idea of using the heritage language as a medium of instruction, not the target. So when you think about it, the thing that heritage language learners have missed most is that they did not get formal schooling typically in their language, and they didn't develop literacy in a formal setting. Maybe, you know, maybe their parents taught them to read at home or something, but often they've totally missed that academic environment. And so what they need is extra high quality input, is what she says, in formal schooling. And so when you are speaking in a formal setting, you know, the grammatical structures, the vocabulary, certainly in languages that say differentiate the formal versus informal speech, that's a place that they may not have been exposed to formal register very much, because it's not what they were seeing at home. Various properties of the standard language and so on. And again, it's not because the standard language is the right language, it's just that it's a valuable option to have at your fingertips. It's always about the more that you are able to be varied in how you communicate with people in a variety of settings, the better it works for people, honestly. So in summary, these are some of the lessons personally that I've taken from our work over the years with the heritage language programs and from our presentations and learning at the symposia. We also hosted the Heritage Language Research Institute one summer at the UW, so that was very intensive, a lot of good learning. Basically, you want to recognize who they are in all of their beautiful complexity. We're delighted with all of them, regardless of what they know. You know, we don't want to, like you say, I think in a couple of the chat points, don't start out by, oh my God, they can't even do their subjunctive correctly. You know, where are they in terms of their proficiency, and wherever they are is the right place for them now. And our purpose is to help them go beyond that, to help them get to higher levels. And then that making the learning meaningful, engaging, and accessible, helping them be active, autonomous learners. They're really very self-directed because their language is part of their identity. It's not a subject in school like I came and I learned math or something like that. That's a subject that kind of exists outside of me. No, this is like very internal. Language is something you internalize. Project-based learning is a great way to get to be able to accomplish that. You know, challenge them to get out of their comfort zone by all kinds of things that you can do in providing opportunities, and make sure that the heritage language is the medium of instruction and give them extra high quality input that is meaningful to them. So that's kind of my overview of some key lessons about working with heritage learners. All of these certainly apply in a classroom setting, but especially remotely, and that's what I'm going to go to next. So how can we do these things remotely? So the solution, or one solution that I'm going to share today, is the Heritage Language Global Competence Certificate. I'm going to start by just telling you a little bit about the Global Competence Certificate program and what we've been doing in that area. And actually, I have a little Vimeo video, so I'm going to leave that full screen, I think. Okay, I'm going to go to the video, and I'm just going to play about 6 minutes of it because I want you to hear in particular a student that got involved with our program this spring. And I think you'll be very impressed with what she did in a very short time. Oh, excuse me, I'm just going to make sure that I've shared this. Let's see, I'm going to unshare and make sure I've shared it, sharing the sound. Yes, good, got it. Hi, everybody. This is a group that's going to present to you just briefly an overview of the Global Competence Certificate. I'm Michele Anciaux Aoki. I'm retired from Seattle Public Schools, and I am just an international education advocate.
I'm Noah Zeichner. I'm a high school social studies and Spanish teacher in Seattle Public Schools.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ryan Hauk. I teach at Glacier Peak High School in Snohomish and direct the Global Classroom Program at the World Affairs Council in Seattle.
Hello, I'm Santoshi Pusupati. I'm a freshman at the International Community School in Kirkland, and I have created a website for the Global Competence Certificate.
Yeah, we're super excited that Santoshi could join us today because she joined in this project during the spring of COVID-19. And she's the proof that this thing actually works from the student point of view. So we've asked her to join us. So I'm going to just ask Ryan to take a moment to introduce the Global Competence Certificate portfolio, which is posted on the World Affairs Council website.
So the Global Competence Certificate portfolio project is an important way for students and teachers to engage in global learning. The World Affairs Council and our program has a mission to engage students in a number of different global competencies. And this is an opportunity for students really to reflect and to share what they've learned over the course of their high school career. We'll go into more details in just a moment, and we'll talk more about what the World Affairs Council has to offer. But I really believe that this is an opportunity for students and teachers to engage locally and globally in a program that will give you the perspective that global education matters.
Great. Here's our web page on the International Education Washington website. We'll send you that link if you'd like it. And it again just provides a little background on what the Global Competence Certificate is. Just for reference, if you're interested, we did research in Seattle schools along with the World Affairs Council in 2016 and looked at a variety of different certificate models. And then we actually piloted it in Seattle schools in 2017, and Ryan has also done it with students at Glacier Peak High School. And so we've got some experience. Based on that, we felt that we could really do this during 2020 in the spring during COVID-19, and we hope to continue it through the summer and everything like that. I did want to just share this site as well, which is the globaledcertificate.org. And this is a good evidence that we're not alone in our interest in having students have a way to demonstrate their competency in around global issues, around intercultural understanding, and actually issues that are very, very current right now in our country. this is our page that just describes pretty much what we're telling you about here. But if you're interested in seeing the map of other states or other models that are done, that's where you'd go. So I'm going to turn it over to Noah to just tell us a little bit more about why do it and what is it made up of.
Great. Thanks, Michelle. This certificate program is really an opportunity for students to work on the skills and competencies that are necessary to be active global citizens. And we've divided this certificate into 3 areas. And you'll hear a little bit about each of these areas in a moment. There's global learning, and there is international engagement. And the 3rd area is language and intercultural learning. And this certificate is a chance to take many experiences from both academics, from projects that you might do in school, to after school clubs and activities, and even experiences that you might have with your family, traveling, learning a language, whether you learn that language at home or in school. I'm going to turn it over to Santoshi, who's going to show us what her website, which is a work in progress, looks like. So you'll get a sense of the visual of the final product, and then we'll go into detail in each of those 3 areas.
Thanks, Noah. As you can see on the screen, there's the draft of my website. It has the 3 pages of the 3 competencies, which are global engagement, international learning, language and intercultural learning. And I just like to talk a little bit about my experience building this website and why I put the things that I did. My experience, first of all, building this website, very positive. I used Google Sites for it. It was very fluid, seamless. It really felt like an easy experience. And I am an avid traveler, and I've traveled to 17 countries, so I had a lot of stuff to put on this page. So if we want to just go over to the international learning page, for example. In international learning, I talk about where I've traveled and a catalog of some of my most recent travel experiences, where I've been, and moreover, what I've learned from it. And what I've found with the website is that it's not so much about the things that you've done, more it is that how you reflect on it. So, you know, I've been to 17 countries in the world, but simply putting that fact there didn't solidify my global competence. What really did that for me is how I connected it to my daily life and the things that I've done with the experiences that I've had. Just one more page that I want to focus on. If you go to language and intercultural learning, I have experience learning 3 languages, which are Hindi, Telugu, and Spanish. And again, simply saying that I know these languages or that I've taken them at school or that I speak them at home with my family, it doesn't really prove a lot. What really proves a lot is the experiences that I reflect on them with, and I guess the way that you transcribe them. That's the #1 message that I think everyone who's pursuing a global competence certificate can remember. So if you look on that page there, you'll see that I wrote each of these in the languages that I've learned, except for Telugu, which I can't read. But moreover, I think it's just about, you know, reflecting on the experiences that you've had, connecting them to your daily life. And this is a really good opportunity for anyone who's even done something that you could be considered global. So if you've been to a restaurant with a different culture, if you've just toured another place, writing about a very reflective experience, and it connects you at heart, I think. So I'd like to turn it over to the others to go more in depth about global engagement, language and intercultural learning, and international learning.
Thank you, Santoshi. That was marvelous. And about how long have you been working on that project, by the way?
I have been working on it for around 2 weeks.
Okay, so around 2 weeks. Now, she's been working on it for a lifetime because a lot of those experiences are from earlier in her life. And that's the great thing about this project is that it's not about one class or something that you learned last week and now are writing a report. You can take anything that you've experienced in your life and put it together. But when you get into a creative mode, like making a website, it's wonderful because it's very iterative. You can just start it and build it and expand it and so on.
Exactly.
So we talked about these 3 different areas, and we've started pages kind of getting started on each one of them. Okay. I'm going to go back to the presentation now, and I'm hoping that's still working. Somebody let me know in the chat or speak up if you can't see the page. So what is it? I think you got the general idea from that overview video at the beginning. Basically, it was a project that we started in Seattle Public Schools working together with the World Affairs Council Global Classroom Project. That's where Ryan Hauk works. He's also a full-time teacher. And both Ryan and Noah actually were world educators in past years, and so this was part of their passion too. We originally wanted to create it as part of our international schools in Seattle, something that high school students would have a chance to do that would really differentiate their educational experience. But when we put it out to the general community through the World Affairs Council, the first year when we piloted, we had about maybe 15 students who were working with us, and we did Zoom meetings basically for all of them to work on that. So that's another reason we know that it actually works. Here's another student's portfolio from that first year, Becky, Global Competence, and you can go look at that a little later. And the components, as Noah outlined, are these 3 areas of global learning, which is related to the Global Competence matrix from the work of the Asia Society. International engagement or experience is more your experience. If you've traveled abroad, that would be a place that might happen. But it could also be, as Santoshi mentioned, local or global experiences, like just going down to the international district and reflecting on that. And then the language and intercultural learning is the part that is probably most interesting and relevant to us as world language teachers, and in this context of working with heritage language learners, because that's a perfect place for them to really reflect on what do they know about their language, who speaks their language in their family, do they have connections to family members back in the home country that they could contact, and so on. So in this section of the presentation, if you go back to the Google Doc I shared, there's a place where you'll see that looks like this, and you can put your name if you want to, but put any questions you have there and I'll respond to them after the webinar too. So why is it relevant to heritage language learners? As I mentioned, we actually introduced it in Seattle, and Pedro Lopez Chavez, who is our dual language immersion teacher at Chief Sealth International High School, working with students who had been through the dual language immersion program. Many of them were heritage learners of Spanish. Some of them were actually pretty recent arrivals. The program just kept growing with heritage learners whenever they arrived. So it was predominantly heritage speakers that were part of that. So after they completed their IB exams, their International Baccalaureate Spanish exam, they also did IB History of the Americas in Spanish and World History and so on, then they had that time in the spring to put this together. And Pedro organized the presentations of the portfolios, and I was one of the people invited to listen to them. He had other people from the community in his school, and that was how the students got feedback on them. And they presented in English. It was a mixed audience. And I have to say, it was so moving to me to hear how meaningful it had been to them to have the opportunity to be learning in their language, to learn academic content in their language through their dual language program all those years. So it was very positive. The one piece we didn't really do or have enough time to do was to have them actually create the whole thing bilingually. And I don't mean just like translate everything. You might have some pieces in English and some in Spanish, for example. Then you just saw the example from Santoshi, and here's again a link to that. So again, she was not taking this on primarily as a heritage speaker. She was taking this on just because she attends the International Community School in Lake Washington School District and wanted to have an interesting project to do this spring while school was not in session. But as we got more into the language aspect, it really got her thinking about, wow, what have I done with language? As she mentioned, Telugu is the language she speaks natively or as a heritage learner, but she never learned to read and write it, but she does read and write Hindi. What else? About the process itself, again, because we've done this with a number of students now, so we can see that they get it very fast. It allows learners to explore and share their identity, their language, their intercultural and international experiences, but they're also able to study and research important global issues and topics and interact with people, interviews, for example, with professionals, which have high academic rigor. So the nice thing, there's a lot of variety. If you really want to reflect on yourself, your culture, your language, you could do that part for quite a while. If you're like really into issues, maybe students this fall, I think we might work with some students around the pandemic, sort of comparing the response in other countries around the world with what we're doing in the United States. It taps into their creativity because they get to develop a website, and it has text and images, video, and so on. And you saw what Santoshi did just in a couple of weeks. So she had to learn new tech skills in order to do that comfortable. And it really gives an authentic experience of presentational communication. Again, that's a key feature of project-based learning, that you create a product, but you also present on it. You use language to talk about it, not just to write about it. How do we do it remotely? Well, as I mentioned, we've actually always been we've been doing it remotely because we've always had students that were interested in doing it who weren't in one classroom. This spring, the way we did it is that we had our website and we would do weekly Zoom sessions that people could attend. And you saw the overview video that has some of the information that we typically shared. We give students ideas of resources to access to get started. And we can go look at some of those things on the web in a moment if you'd like to. We then encourage students to explore and come back to another Zoom session just to check in, bring us drafts and so on. For example, Santoshi came back about a week after, or maybe 2 weeks after she had first come, and she brought what she had, and we gave her feedback, like the part on the global learning. We felt that we wanted her to really become more familiar with the global competence matrix and more explicitly talk about investigating the world, recognizing perspectives, communicating ideas, and taking action. So really, our role as educators is just to encourage and inspire the students and suggest or help them to find resources to use. And there were a lot of virtual resources, programs, and so on tied to global issues this spring that we could recommend to them to attend as well. So that's kind of generally how you do it remotely. And now I'm really excited to share with you a concrete proposal that we have submitted. We have a team of community language educators that are connected to the Ethnic Heritage Council in Washington. And we have worked with Evergreen School District, which is just in Vancouver, Washington, to submit a proposal for a grant, a heritage language grant that's being offered by OSPI. We just submitted the proposal a couple of weeks ago, and we'll probably hear within another week. What we've proposed is to do this type of project-based curriculum that will integrate content with functional language. So we'll have the language teachers will be giving guidance to the students, the heritage language learners, who may not be completely comfortable or experienced in things like writing summaries or narratives or descriptions. And we'll be doing it all remotely, offering it online. There'll probably be some videos for guidance, but also Zoom meetings and so on. And it will be flexible and personalized to the students' interests and needs. But of course, they will get a lot more opportunity to have language coaching so that the language that they present in written form or when they do oral presentations is something that is, getting up in the higher proficiency level that they would like to attain. Meanwhile, of course, we'll use the language, the heritage language, as the medium of instruction and also the medium of their communicating with each other. We'll really be guiding them to bring in that more academic language into their conversational language with each other. Over the year, so the plan would be to start this in the fall, and then by the spring, they would be developing evidence that could be used for the Global Competence Certificate. And we would also, and would be in all of those areas that were outlined earlier. And as our project, the teachers would be developing a common set of learning plans, and then each language would adapt them for their language. And the plan is to make all of those available through open educational resources, so any other heritage language could participate. So the goals are that the heritage language learners prepare their Global Competence Certificate portfolio. If they are ready and inclined, they would be able to present it to a team with the World Affairs Council volunteers and staff, as well as people from the community who speak the language and could assess whether they had met the criteria. But we're also going to do world language competency-based credit testing for the languages, and we hope that many of the students will qualify for the global seal of biliteracy. They may also qualify for our state seal of biliteracy. So this is really the end of my PowerPoint, so I'm going to go back to the web and we'll look at a few more things and maybe some of your questions and so on. All right, back to the website where the Global Competence Certificate is. Maybe I'm going to actually stop share so people can see each other a little bit now. And you can put questions in the chat, or maybe Zoe's noticed if there's questions there, or in the Google Doc that you'd like to share right now. and we just kind of open it up. So I see this question, is it available to heritage learners in other states besides Washington? Well, in principle, this program is available to anybody who's interested. We are hoping with the World Affairs Council in Seattle that we can interest all of the World Affairs Councils and the National Council to take an interest in offering a similar program. So we would not say no, probably, to a student from out of the area if they're interested. I might also mention that, you know, often heritage learners are kind of sprinkled across different districts and schools and so on. So it's a good thing, actually, to be honest. If we didn't have COVID-19, we might not have undertaken this because you wouldn't have had a critical mass to actually have a formal class unless it was probably Spanish, for example, where there's a lot of heritage speakers found more in one district. But this way, we can be attracting students from a variety of districts, and the languages that we've proposed to work for in this grant are Spanish, which will be primarily the heritage language Spanish speakers in Evergreen School District, but also Romanian and Russian, which are two big languages in that district, and also well represented in the area like in Bellevue and up in north of Seattle area. Let's see what other questions. Can a teacher sign up their students for the certificate? Yes, actually, absolutely. In fact, this was also really wonderful in the Zoom sessions that we did in the spring. We often had teachers as well as students and sometimes parents signing up. Anybody could launch this effort, and a teacher could do it with all of the students. And in fact, that's one of our hopes with this grant, is that we'll be providing a model for Evergreen School District to build this into their high school heritage language program for the Spanish speakers, but also find a way to offer it perhaps with support from bilingual IAs or other people from the community, so that many of the languages they have, like Chuukese, as well as Russian and Romanian and others, Vietnamese I think is another prominent language for them, that those students would have a chance to have something that kind of motivates them to continue to work on their language and take it into a wider range of use by this opportunity to explore various global issues. Can elementary students apply? Yes, and certainly there's no reason that elementary students could not be doing the same kind of thing. Obviously, they might not go to an adult World Affairs Council event, but it would be great, for example, for high school students to go and be interviewed by elementary students, and elementary students to create a write-up of their experience of them and so on. So they may not, in other words, meet the criteria to earn the Global Competence Certificate, or there may be other levels that we would develop. They're not developed yet, but everything that they do in the earlier years would be part of their portfolio, and that would be great. How long does it last? Well, from our point of view, it's a point in time. You qualified for it at some point. We'll probably be aiming for possibly January if there are students that want to complete, sooner. Otherwise, in probably May, June timeframe, that the World Affairs Council would organize this. We're hoping that we would actually be able to organize a conference, virtually or in person, where students could present, talk about the experience, and interchange. Teachers could come and learn from the students and things like that. There's no credit attached to earning the certificate from the World Affairs Council. However, a school district could certainly decide, or a teacher could decide, that completing the certificate would be part of the classroom course requirements or expectations. That's what Pedro did. So the students did need to complete their Global Competence Certificate after they finished their IB exams in order to complete the course. Do students need to pay any fee to participate? The World Affairs Council is not charging anything. If we get this grant, we'll be well positioned because it would provide some support to the World Affairs Council staff to support students and teachers and everybody more. Right now, it's all a labor of love, and certainly my time is all volunteer. So we'll have to see how it goes, but I really believe this is an extremely effective program, because what I've seen is that when the students themselves come, they get it like right away. And if you can do something that students get right away, that's a good thing. Do they have to be in a language class or do they do it by themselves? Oh, that's a perfect question. Based on how we've set up the Global Competence Certificate, and we did it very intentionally. Some other global citizen certificates and programs that exist in other states have these checklists, like you have to have had 4 or 5 years of a language, or you have to have completed an AP course or something. We did not do that in Seattle and Washington because we felt it was very important to have a process that was based on what students could actually do without having to rely on being in a certain kind of school. A lot of schools in Washington do not even have language classes beyond second year, and they don't have AP courses and so on. So in principle, anybody could do that. Even if you didn't really speak another language very fluently, you could talk about the students that you've met that speak another language. Have they taught you a few words? Did that give you insight into your language? Or whatever you could do. In other words, we did not demand a certain level of proficiency because, for one thing, we have another way to recognize students who have high language proficiency, and that's the state seal of biliteracy. I teach an EL study support group and I'm looking for ways to, yes, that would be wonderful. And they could do it in English and they could get, they could do it bilingually, honestly, but they could do it in English and get support for their writing and so on, whether it's from you as a teacher or other adults or the World Affairs Council, staff and volunteers potentially. I've offered that myself to a Russian student that was, his parents were concerned that he wasn't going to be developing his English writing enough. And I said, well, rather than taking like a writing course, I would do this because that would be the writing that you're choosing to doing, and I'll be happy to provide feedback. I'm feeling like I'm just sort of dominating all the talking. So if anybody wants to unmute and ask a question more directly, that would be fine. We're at about 2:52. Actually, I think I will share my screen again, just to show you a few more website things just to orient you to where that a lot of the information is. So this is internationaledwa.org. It's a website that we started back in 2003. And has been a source of a lot of work around international education. This is one of the projects, the Global Competence Certificate. I am going to just point out that we've been developing more resources, for example, how to get started on global learning. It both explains what we're expecting in that arena, and you can go look at the work from Asia Society, has a lot of good resources about that. Some ideas just to get started, and what to do with virtual global learning. So we do suggest that you look at the Sustainable Development Goals as a great place to start, because chances are you'll find there some area of particular interest to you, whether it's quality education, good health and well-being, clean water and sanitation, and so on. And if you go there, you'll start to find resources. And of course, there's a gazillion resources in other countries. We haven't put that all there, but over time, hopefully we'll add more. And then the World Affairs Council itself has a lot of resources from workshops they've done over the years. So for example, this package on the plastic island, pollution's effect on marine life, although it was created for teachers, it's got a lot of resources in it that students could do. So a student might review it, pick out a couple of articles or whatever, and summarize, talk about what did it make them think about, does it make them think about wanting to do something in their own environment, and so on. Another great source there within Global Classroom is the World Affairs Council World Essay Contest, which is, let me go find that, World Citizen Essay Contest, which is run every year. The nice thing about this is that they post the winning essays. They don't have them posted for 2020. And by the way, Santoshi got a 3rd place. That was really cool. But there's a prompt. So if you go to the prompt, then you get the idea of how to formulate something that would be very interesting to research and write about and talk about. And then there's a lot of examples from previous years. So that can give students an idea of kind of how do you structure something. Or you could compare like how the structure, these were all written in English, how would that be structured differently if you were writing it in a different language? Or even suggesting that students find a topic that looked interesting to them, like plastic in our oceans. And sorry, I'm so all plastic stuff, but I guess it's a big thing. they could read this and then summarize it perhaps, or pull out what were the things that made them think about that. So that's some of the things that you could do in this arena. There's also events at the World Affairs Council, more for high school students probably than elementary or middle school, but they're very, very interesting speakers, ambassadors, and people that have, you know, lived abroad and so on. And because they're all virtual now, the World Affairs Council is offering them for free to students. So it's an hour typically. That's not too long. If you, as a student, if you got into it and you really didn't like it, you could just leave. But you might have really liked it. So then you start to connect what's going on with interesting things. You might listen to it in English, but then go find someone who is a speaker of that language who could also talk about it with you. And there's a lot of resources here from the Asia Society as well. And yeah, more there. And we have, as I mentioned, there's also ideas under international engagement, in particular, how to get to local and virtual. So, you know, take a little local visit to the Wajimaya website and read about the history, pick out some items that you might like to get and just reflect on that. So even though you couldn't go to China right now and you couldn't go down to the international district right now, perhaps, I mean, now maybe you could actually go to the international district. That would be nice. Anyway, those are some of the resources. I'm just going to see if there's any more questions for me right now. And then Zoe, do you want to finish up with clock hours?
Michelle, just one more question from a teacher. She's wondering if you can share your slides with us, since you have a lot of clickable links in your slides.
Yeah, I'll make sure that I put all the links right into that Google Doc that I had, but I also will save this. This is a PowerPoint, so I mean, it's a Google slide, so I'll save that and put it in there too. So as long as you have that first tiny URL that I gave you, you'll find everything. And I think, Zoe, you could probably email it out to them again afterwards if you liked.
All right, thank you.
Thank you everybody so much for coming today and just participating. I will let you know if we get the grant. It would be very exciting. And there should be, like I say, a lot of regular opportunities for professional development around working with heritage languages and in particular pursuing this global competence certificate.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much for this very informative webinar you haven't given us. Thank you, Michelle. Hi, everyone. Once again, thank you for joining us today. We took attendance, and those are our WAFLT members will receive an email with clock hour evaluation and automatic link to the clock hour form that you can download and print. Now I'm going to share our WAFLT for virtual conference poll. See. Yeah, we would appreciate your idea. And if you have any questions about our WAFLT membership, please direct your questions to wafflebot@gmail.com. All right. And please also check out our website for our membership benefits. Actually, there are a lot. Okay. And thank you again for coming today. And we look forward to seeing you again at our next webinar. It's on August 13. It will be led by our current WAFLT president, Catherine. All right. Thank you. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me or email us. Thank you. Thank you for coming.